Awesome. Well, welcome everybody to Hope. Today I have my friend Mike with me. How are you today, Mike?
I'm doing great. Thank you. How are you?
Great. I'm great. Thank you for joining me. You said you're in Maryland, right?
Yep.
Maine.
Baltimore
Maryland.
County, Maryland.
Okay, awesome. And you've been there about 4 years, you said?
Grew up here and I've been back about 4 years. Yep.
Okay, awesome. So I met Mike a few years ago in Toledo. I want to say it was around 2017, 2016, right in that area, I would say. So yeah, so I had seen a post that he had and I thought, you know what, I'm going to ask him to share a story of hope because I know he's got a story of recovery with hope. So what hope is helping other people evolve. And my mission and vision here is just to help people get through their struggles to get to a strength. I feel like so many people on a daily basis feel like they're struggling alone in whatever struggle they have. And there's so much hope out there. Unfortunately, we have people that have stories of struggle, but fortunately they have gotten to a better place in life and they can offer hope to others. So I know Mike's story. I know that he's in recovery and I know that it's a great story of hope. So I guess, Mike, if we can just go back, you said you've been sober about 14 years. So if we can go back like pre getting sober, you got sober at a young age, you said. So if we could just like go back to like what got you into drugs, I guess, what got you to the point of sick and tired of being sick and tired, and then kind of we'll go from there.
Absolutely. So my clean date is July 28th, 2005. So actually 16 and a half. So I'll be coming up on 17 next July. It's interesting because when I think back to my using and drinking when I started, I share about this often. I believe it's all feelings based for me. Everything relates back to feelings. And it's interesting that your podcast is on hope, because the reason that I got clean and sober in the first place is because I received hope from somebody else before I knew what that meant. And before I could even conceptualize that I took something from someone else and was able to, really manifest that into something positive. But hope it is so vitally important. And I truly believe that that's the only reason that I'm, sitting here. So I got clean when I was young. Like I mentioned, I was 21 years old, but I started using when I was about 12, 13. I started off just like I'm sure most people did. The DARE program used to come to our school and they would tell us, you drink, then you're going to smoke, then you're going to do this, this, and this, and end up with a needle in your arm. And that is literally exactly what I did when I used. But when I was able to identify later in life, and started thinking about why I picked up in the first place, for me, if sex had done it, if gambling had done it, if stealing had done it, then I would be, a thief. Alcohol and drugs did what I was looking for, which it quieted my mind down, and that inner voice, which is so critical and still exists today, that tells me that things are going to be bad and I'm horrible and it's never going to work out and you're not good enough, you're not tall enough, you're not all the different things. When I used, I didn't hear it anymore. And I could be anybody that I wanted to be. Especially who I thought you wanted me to be. And I remember using and feeling better about the things that I wanted to fix, and making a conscious decision to make sure I always felt that way from a very young age. I talk about my family a lot because my family is great. My parents are still married. They're not drug addicts. I don't come from a home where there was much trauma or any of that. And yet I still found what I found and used how I used. A lot of mental health in my family, but no addiction. So my using progressed. I don't like to tell a whole drug story necessarily, but I went and I ended up with a needle in my arm. I was in and out of rehabs and a couple arrests and a couple jail stays. And then I ended up getting shipped to Florida. And this was early 2005, January 2005. At this point, I'd been to treatment twice. I'd been arrested as an adult twice. I had pretty much burned the bridges that I had developed at that point, had nowhere else to go. It was a really unique instance for me, though, because I remember H&I coming in and they would bring meetings in, and I was introduced to a 12-step fellowship and I would hear the things they were saying. However, I was looking for the differences. And that's, the first instant of hope that I got, even though I didn't stay clean after this, but I would hear people share and I would find out why I was uniquely different from them, at least in my mind.
Right.
I hadn't done this yet. I hadn't done that yet. I'm young. I could still do this. I could still do that. And, but I remember thinking to myself that I was certainly aware that one is too many and 1,000 is never enough. That made sense to me. When I started using and I put a substance into my body, I could not stop. And I was really unhappy with the negative consequences that transpired when I started using. And it was the
Mhm.
first time ever that I made a conscious effort to not use anymore. And I moved to Florida and I went to a sober home and I didn't use for almost 60 days, but I did not find a God of my understanding. I did not get a sponsor. I did not believe in the fellowship. I didn't do anything that was suggested. And I was absolutely miserable. I was more depressed and more lost than I ever was before. At least when I was using, I didn't have to feel any of that stuff. I felt nothing.
Right.
Now, all these feelings came in and, my misinterpretation of what the program was, I thought I was lied to. I thought if I stopped shooting dope, then I would be happy. And that's not
Mhm.
what the fellowship teaches us. At least for me, the only promise that I get is that if I stop using, I can find a life beyond my wildest dreams. I never have to use again. And with that, I can do a lot of things. It's not promised to me the things that I can get, but I have a shot. And I went out and I used with a mission because I thought that, this was the last house on the block and it didn't work. And I ended up with an abscess. I got something called MRSA. The MRSA spread through the body. And, the God of my understanding did for me what I could not do for myself. I overdosed in a bathroom at work. I was working at a lovely place called Applebee's off of Linton Boulevard. And when I got to the hospital, they told me if I had waited 2 more days, they would have taken my arm from the shoulder that the MRSA had spread, and the infection was bad. And I got lucky. I still have my arm, obviously, as you can see. And, that was when my journey started at that moment.
Awesome. So I want to go back just a little bit when you said, I like what you said about going into the program, but not, I guess, really working a program.
Sure.
And I find that a lot with a lot of people that are in recovery, that they think that they're going to go through those doors and voila, everything's going to be fine. And then they learn, though, that you have to learn to live life differently. Like you said before, with me too, I was putting the alcohol in my body, I was putting the drugs in my body. So I was masking all of that. And I like how you say things like, and you would be whoever I wanted you to be. And that's the way that I was too. Whoever I was with, that's who I was going to be. I'd fit right in, no matter what I was using or doing. So I think, and since you were in recovery and you started your recovery journey, you opened facilities to help other people, correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Yes. So so that passion had to come from like you learning that there is so much hope out there, but you need the tools in order to do that. So what made you decide to be like, what, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to help other people with getting through rehab and doing that? What made
Sure.
you decide to do that?
So it's interesting because I heard 2 things there. And the first I'll talk about a little more. I am a perfect example of somebody that decided to not want to use anymore without changing anything and continue to use. And I see that all the time. And I see it with friends of mine that are clean and sober many years. I see it with people who are just coming in, and I see it with people who are just, still out there. I was very good at blaming other people and not capable of taking any personal responsibility for my own actions and my own outcomes. There's always consequences to my actions. And without change, it's just me and, the same sick thinking that I had before. And it took a long time to realize that. It's funny because the program for me and the fellowship, I still go to meetings, I still sponsor men. It's something that's very important to me. And being, clean and sober at this length of time now, I don't wake up with the obsession to use anymore, thank goodness. But the program for me teaches us principles, and those principles can easily be transcribed into my own life, whether that's business, whether that's my family, whether it's friendships, and hope is one of them. These are things that we learn. And at least for myself, the second I realized that those are interchangeable is when I started growing and developing, and my personality changed, my thought process changed. And I think that is an easy segue into your second question, which is why I decided to get into the space. What I witnessed when I lived in Florida was a lot of facilities that opened that, in my opinion, were doing it for a variety of different reasons. I'll just say that. And there was room for facilities to open to do them for the right reasons.
Right.
And it's interesting because as we started expanding in that world, I met Matt Bell in Toledo. And, Matt is a charismatic person. He's a charismatic speaker. And I remember the first time I met him, I was really excited because I love speaking. I love public speaking myself. And he's better than I am. And that doesn't happen often. And I was enamored, and we developed this relationship, and he came to me, and I'll never forget, this was probably back in 2016. And he wanted to open up facilities in Toledo, his hometown, because at that time there was no abstinent-based programs that really existed that had a full continuum.
Right.
Not saying there's anything wrong with MAT. It's a necessary thing. And a lot of people, depending on the intake and the criteria, can be placed in different areas. But to have the option of getting truly clean and sober without any other substances, it wasn't even available. And he was so passionate about it. We dove in, quite naively and almost, ignorant to what we were getting up against. And I'm grateful for that, because if I had known, all that I know now, I don't know that we would have ever done that before. I'm very grateful for it. And it's cool because, especially in that area, I consider Ohio a second home to me. I'm there often. I travel there still once a month. We have a lot of friends and family there. And to watch what we were able to build expand the way that it did, because the need was so necessary, it was there. You have these wonderful facilities that have been around for 30 years, and yet we were able to get in and offer a service that hadn't been offered before. And it really sparked a lot of hope for a lot of people.
Yes.
I believe.
Yeah, me too. I believe that too, for sure. Now, did you have, I know that you had in Toledo, affiliated with Toledo. Did you have other places too then in other states? Okay.
Yep. The first one that we had opened back then was probably eight and a half years ago now, in Florida. And I went back to my home state of Maryland, and we were able to open up with another great friend of mine and partner. His name is Kabir, in Montgomery County, Maryland. So outside of Washington, DC. And through a series of events, which is probably a much longer story than we have today, I switched partnership groups. My old mentor and partner had relapsed actually after 10 years. Well, 9.5 years. I thought he had 10 years. And the trust was broken, and it was time for a change. And I met, my new partners, and one of them happened to live in Baltimore County, which is literally where I grew up.
Oh, okay.
We moved back home. We sold our facilities in Florida, and then started expanding in the states that like Maryland, Ohio, Georgia, etc.
Okay. Awesome. So did you say that he was your mentor that relapsed? He was the one person in my life outside of my sponsor that I never considered could use. It wasn't a thought. It couldn't happen. It was a mind-blowing experience, and a very difficult time for both of us and for everybody else involved also. Certainly his family and his wife struggled, and thankfully he made it back and he's doing really well now. But it was a jarring experience for everybody. It was definitely, scary. Yeah. So that'll bring me to a good point then, because, the complacency that people get, and that's kind of like what you were talking about, like you still work a program and all that. And sometimes people will get so complacent, and unfortunately it can happen that they fall back. And when you see that happen with somebody that, has years under their belt, you're like, what? Wait, them? How did that happen? But that just shows us, I feel like, that we're all just human beings. We're all just, living life every day, but learning to live life differently, and learning that, it's out there no matter what. I just had a friend 3.5 years ago. Well, he was sober for 3.5 years, and he took a Percocet on Valentine's Day the night before, and it was pure fentanyl, and he died the next day, and I'm like, man, he had 3.5 years. But you hear those stories, and I think for me personally, and I don't know if you feel this way too, that's just a reminder to me how easy it can happen. Like, I always talk about, I never ever, I feel like there's no desire in my heart or soul to ever use or drink again, but there's always that glimmer that it could happen, so I always keep that in my head, especially when I hear those stories, and thank God that he's back and in recovery, because you hate to see that, and a lot of times when that goes back like that, that's when we lose people forever. Yeah. Because I had my uncle do that. He was sober for, I think 12 years. Wow. And he went back to drinking, and I swear, and I think I keep this in my head too, the day he went back, he was exactly like he was 12 years ago. And I was like, just like that, it happens. So I'm glad that you mentioned that, because I think a lot of people out there feel like they look and they'll be like, oh, look at Mike. He's been sober, almost 15 years, right? Is that we said 16?
16. Yep.
16 years. Yeah. And the same with me. And they're like, oh, I want to be, but they don't understand that it's not like we just wake up every day and life's a joy. We have to work at these things too. And I think that reminding people of that is a big thing too, because people will be like, oh yeah, Timmy, I want to be like you. You're sober and happy and da, 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 da. And I'm like, I've worked a program for a long time. It's not like I woke up day one through my sobriety and I'm like, I'm good. Everything is great, So I think people need to be reminded of that, that it's a journey,
It's a continual journey. I completely agree with you. And life shows up. It shows up differently and in different circumstances, because I know for myself, I'll speak for myself, the things that happen in my life are no different than when they happen early in recovery. The difference is that I have more tools and I have more understanding and more experience with how to deal with them and how I want to deal with them. But I mean, to your point, I've witnessed so many of my friends and acquaintances, some people that I'm not close with, that had significant time, some a couple years and some way more time than I have. And I've watched some go out and die. I've watched some go out, and if I'm being honest, to me, this is even worse than dying. Lose everything that they've worked so hard for. They've lost their children. They've lost their families. I have 2 little girls. My kids are 3.5 and 6.5. And to think about, in my mind, if I had to live without ever having my kids, to me, that's purgatory. That's worse than dying for me, and I've watched a lot of things, and this is, all spectrums of financial success and other areas of success. Some of them, were doing well, and some of them were doing, exceptionally well, not only in work and business, but in their families and their lives. And it doesn't matter. The instance is the same. They forgot and they stopped doing the basics. I mean, people talk about that all the time, and I hear it all the time. And sometimes I don't want to go to a meeting, if I'm being honest with you. I don't. I'd much rather go out or stay at home with my family or whatever it is, but I do. It's just part of what it is. I'm reminded often about how lucky I am and how grateful I am, because I don't know, you talk about life beyond your wildest dreams. I didn't know what wildest dreams were. The things that I have now are my wildest dreams. I couldn't even conceptually tell you what I would have wanted when I first got clean. I would have been selling myself so short. It's unbelievable. And, is one person in particular that had about, I want to say 12 years. I've known him since we're kids. He's done really well for himself, both personally and business wise. Had built a tremendous business, sold it, built another one, sold it, had a beautiful family, was married, committed relationship, 2 kids, and he used, and he went out, and he had stopped going to meetings. He had stopped calling a sponsor. And it's interesting because I share about this often also, depending on the place that I am in my life. I get funny sharing honestly at meetings, and it's all me. It's my stuff. I feel judged. I feel as though the things that I'm sharing, or maybe the stuff I'm going through, isn't relatable sometimes, as we succeed in life and our problems become larger.
Right.
I remember sharing one time I was getting sued, or the company was getting sued. My wife got served paperwork in our driveway with our infant child. And it was a complaint of sorts that the company had. And we ended up working through it. But I wanted to share about that in a meeting, that I felt shameful and embarrassed that my wife had to deal with this. And I didn't. And I didn't because I was fearful that if I shared things like that, then no one would be able to relate. And how wrong I am. There's people that can relate to every instance we have, whether it's something so small that a bill wasn't paid, or something so large that, you get served paperwork in your driveway, or loss of businesses and all these different things. And it's that kind of stuff, when I talked to him, that isolated him. He stopped sharing at meetings because he felt different. And it's interesting, the parallel, because the same ways that I felt different when I was 6 days clean, the reasons are different, but it's the same feelings.
Yes.
If I start feeling different now with 16 years clean, I will stop going to meetings. I will stop sharing where I'm at, and eventually I will pick up. And, I've thought about that often, and I've talked to people about it. I don't believe that I'm going to end up, flying to Vegas and immediately have a needle in my arm. Right. It's going to start really slow. It's going to start really gradually. And I've watched it happen before. And ultimately, my identity as a person, I'm a person in recovery. It's part of who I am. I look at myself as a person in recovery before I look at myself as a father, as a husband, as a business owner. I'm Mike and I'm in recovery. And the second I lose that by picking up a drink or marijuana, some other substance that maybe wasn't my drug of choice, I've now altered and shifted my entire identity. And the shame and the guilt and the lying, that's what's going to take me back out to the drug of my choosing. That's what I believe will happen to me. So I don't do it, and I call people, and I still get upset. I still have bad days, and we do the basic things that people told us to do.
Yeah. So I'm going to ask your opinion on this. And I always say this on here too. This is just my opinion, your opinion. It doesn't mean it's right. It doesn't mean it's wrong, but you just hit a point that I like to talk about a lot. You said that you might, if you went and had a drink or smoked a little weed or something, would lead you back to your drug of choice. I'm really big on that. Like, people are like, well, I still drink. That wasn't my drug of choice. And I'm like, I don't feel like, in my heart, and I always say it's just me, I don't feel like that's a good idea, because I think about it. I go like this. I say, well, okay,
a horrible idea.
It's a horrible idea. Cocaine wasn't my drug of choice. Alcohol was, but I'm not going to go out and start snorting coke because alcohol was my drug of choice. So I always get different opinions about that, especially, with our epidemic of opiates now, right? And heroin. It's definitely an epidemic out there. It's horrible. But I know a lot of people that their drug of choice was heroin. And I know a lot of people that still drink, and I watch them and I can see, I'm like, well, you might not be a heroin addict anymore, but you're an alcoholic now. But that's not my place, right? But sure. I feel like it's the same thing. It's just mind altering, and you're just covering up. And those, unfortunately, is going to end up not a good spot. So that I just wonder your opinion on that.
No, I agree with that completely. So I go to Narcotics Anonymous. That's the fellowship of my choosing. And we believe in complete abstinence from all mood or mind altering substances. It's that simple. Now, as an example, if I picked up a drink right now, I don't think I've taken a drink since I'm 17. I didn't like drinking. It wasn't my drug of choice. However, I believe in my heart that I'm an addict. I have an addictive personality. I believe in the disease of addiction. That is who I am.
Right.
Whether it's a Newport or it is if I like it, I will abuse it. And I do not understand what moderation is. And it's my thinking. It's my obsessive it's the obsessiveness that I think about something, and then the compulsive nature that I carry that thing out. It's no different with gambling or sex or women. All these things can be detrimental to me. And it's how do I utilize them? The second I pick up a drink, I can absolutely abuse alcohol. I would abuse alcohol. It's taking me outside of myself. It doesn't matter if it's my drug of choice or not. It would be the catalyst to getting me back to a place where perhaps an overdose is now a consideration. But the thoughts, the feelings, and my actions and my way of living would change immediately if I picked up a drink, immediately, within one sip, because that is now something that I will obsess about, I will think about. And I experience that now. I have issues with nicotine. Nicotine has been the bane of my existence, for a long time. I quit smoking cigarettes when I'm 27. I was big into cigars, was very content smoking a cigar a day. And I was actually on a vacation with Matt, who we were just talking about before, with our wives. The long story short is we decided that we could smoke one cigarette. We'll be fine. This was about 2 years ago. And it was a pack a day again the second I got back. Like, I never stopped. COVID hit. And now I'm still, now I'm on electronic cigarettes, and it is unbelievably, devastatingly embarrassing. I hate it. I absolutely hate it. And I struggle with it because that's who I am. It doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter if it's a drink. It doesn't matter if it's a cigarette. And my thought process follows,
Yeah, I agree with that. Okay, can I ask you about one more thing that I'm curious, just your opinion on? And,
yeah, sure.
And I enjoy doing these podcasts. I enjoy doing all my podcasts, but this is so relatable to me with you. So can I get your opinion on Suboxone and methadone?
Sure.
What is your opinion on that? My opinion is, and I learned this a long, long time ago, even before I really knew much about them, that they are to be used to help people get off of the drug. And for a short period of time. I know people that have been on Suboxone and methadone for years. And I know the day that they stop, they're back to wanting to use again. So your opinion on that.
So that's a great topic. And I think you could have a podcast centered around this topic because there's that much information and different opinions, not only from people you'll talk to, but especially inside a 12-step fellowship.
Right.
And in the fellowship that I belong to, Narcotics Anonymous, again, we believe in an abstinence-based, no mood or mind altering substance. So I'm going to give you my opinion, not NA's opinion, certainly, and not a treatment center's opinion.
Okay.
My opinion has changed over the years. And it's interesting because if you asked me that question 6 years ago, 5 years ago, I wouldn't have hesitated. And the answer would have been that its sole purpose and sole intention should be as a detox source to get someone off of another opioid. I remember when I was trying to get clean for the first time, I was 18 years old. I went to one of the very first Suboxone clinics because at that point they had buprenorphine. People learned how to inject it. They were abusing it. They then created a non-water-based drug, and it was a Suboxone wafer. And I went to detox. That's what it was for. You went and you did a taper for 7 days, and then you were done. And the idea at that time, of course, was it would get you through the hump of the worst of the detox pains, and then, maybe give you blood pressure medication or whatever else the doctor is prescribing to you after that. And then over the years, of course, to your point, it has morphed into something much different, and it's turned into the new methadone, where methadone's been around forever and people are on maintenance, and some of them are on maintenance forever for the rest of their lives. I sponsor a man right now. He's a lot older than I am. He was on methadone maintenance for 19 years. And his detox was 3 months. I mean, that stuff gets in your bones.
Yeah.
So back to the initial question though, and it's a funny story. You have to understand that my background here, one, comes from a place of, it's non-judgment. It comes from a place of what I believe was right because I know who I am and I know how I use. I was a heinous heroin addict, and I was able to stop, and I was able to get clean. And I know that I don't have to put another substance in my body, and the life that I have is amazing, and it's beyond my wildest dreams, and I'm content and happy. I want that for other people. So when I see someone come in that is in the grips of methadone or Suboxone, it was difficult for me to identify that as really successful, if that makes sense.
Yes.
And I expressed that to a clinician, and this clinician happens to be, and I won't say her name to keep her anonymity. She's also a member of Narcotics Anonymous, lives in Maryland, happens to be a very close friend of mine also. And she's somebody whom I respect as a friend, but also as a clinician. And I said this to her because we were talking about opening a second facility in Maryland, and she brought it up. She said, "Are we going to do MAT?" And of course, there's MAT options like Vivitrol and naltrexone that are non-narcotic, but she was specifically referring to Suboxone. And immediately I said, "No, why would we do that? We're an abstinence-based program. This is not what we do." And she expressed to me an opinion. And again, this is a woman in Narcotics Anonymous who is abstinence-based, who has many years clean, and her clinical perspective. And maybe it's because I was willing to hear her because I respected her. I don't know.
Right.
What she basically said to me, and I'll summarize to the best of my ability because she'll say it way more eloquent than I'm going to right now. But she almost looked at me with disgust and said, "Who am I to judge if someone is not capable and has tried everything they have before, and this person has lived under a bridge? They have not paid taxes. They haven't seen their children in 10 years. They don't understand how to function or shower on a regular basis." And she says, "You're going to tell me that if this man or woman is able to take this other substance and get a job and have an apartment and keep other opioids out of their body because it's a blocker, that's not successful to them?" She was almost berating me for measuring what my view of success is as compared to what someone else's view of success is. And it resonated with me in a different way. It did, because the truth is, just because this is my version of success, that doesn't mean it's for everyone. And if I look at that from a treatment provider standpoint, we can't preach 12-step all the time, whether it's AA, NA, it's not for everyone. Our job as treatment providers is to allow the opportunity for people to find options to do better, to stay clean or sober, and to live fulfilling lives. And whether they get that through church or a synagogue, or, now again, I think NA is the best, or AA, because it worked for me. But that's because that's all I know. None of the other stuff worked for me. There's a plethora of other stuff, smart recovery. And, again, who am I? I'm not a clinician. But what it did for me is it gave me a little bit of a different perspective for the first time ever. And I'm telling you, I was a soapbox standing advocate against those MAT programs. And I have changed my opinion. However, I will put an asterisk next to that. My version and what my reality was about MAT, Suboxone and methadone was what I saw in Florida. And what I saw in Florida with my own eyes for years and years was that every person that came to a facility that offered MAT was put on MAT, all of them, 100% of them. There was no screening process. They would take people that were abstinent, clean. There was people clean for 90 days, they get put on Suboxone. Yeah. I can tell you with full conviction that not only do I disagree with that, but it pisses me off. I mean, you're now creating an addict, in my opinion.
Right.
So going into that conversation, that was my viewpoint, was this is what we mean by MAT. And what she expressed to me is not only is it not necessarily fair to me to measure my own success against someone else's, but if properly screened by, motivated clinicians for the right reasons, not financially motivated clinicians, then I think it's great. Because if you have somebody that's tried and has been screened appropriately, that has gone through a plethora of overdoses, or they've tried an abstinent base before and they've failed 3 times. Who knows? I don't know what the criteria would be because I'm not a clinician, but that there's some sort of mechanism in place where it's not just an auto, yep, you're getting put on, 8 milligrams or whatever it is, that I can get behind and I can stand behind. Now, if you ask me that question as a member of Narcotics Anonymous, for me, if I had a sponsee that was on maintenance, I would tell them, I would happily still talk to them. We would still go to meetings together. I would not shun them, but they're not clean in the eyes of Narcotics Anonymous. It's not, they're not void of opioids. But that doesn't mean they can't change and they can't grow. The other part of what we ended up implementing when I first started exploring that idea was we didn't like calling it maintenance. We like to call it almost a bridge program, where the idea and concept was if someone's put on MAT, the goal was for them to get off the MAT in a successful, in a healthy way, and in a way that was supported. Because you mentioned something that's very important here. If the support mechanism is not set up post stopping the medication, the relapse rate is very high because people don't have the mechanisms to continue therapy or whatever they're doing once they get off the substance. They've used the substance as their program. Without that continuation and that monitoring, I think it's a failure. If you have somebody that's put on 8 milligrams and over a 6-month trajectory, they're weaned down with the goal of getting off, and then another 6 months of outpatient therapy to help support that, we've seen success with that, And on the other side of the coin, I can tell you that this year alone, I don't want to exaggerate, there's been about 3 people. Well, sorry, we're in 2022 now. Last year, I forget that we're already in the new year, but
it all bunches together. The last
it
2
does.
years.
I was saying the last 12 months, I've had 3 people that I'm close with overdose and die. They didn't overdose and survive, they died. And one of them specifically I've known since I'm a kid, and he's struggled and gone back and forth for a long time. And he was clean for the first time for 1.5 years. He had a job, he had a girlfriend, he had his daughter back in his life, he had his family back. He was doing well and he was working a program. And I don't know where it shifted for him, but there was about a month period where it stopped. He ended up picking up and he ended up dying. And it's funny because obviously there's nothing I could have done and there's nothing any of us could have done. Right. However, if he was on Suboxone, he'd probably be alive. And now, do I know that he met criteria and that would be the best for him? I don't know. I know that particular case was a chronic relapser over a span of 24 years, that has tried everything. And I look at that, and the truth is we don't know, right? I don't know if that could have been different. But if he had gotten this, and if they're going to do it, at least the sublingual injection can't be manipulated the same way as the pills can, and if he had gotten that injection, it would have been a blocker and he wouldn't have been able, those types of things go through my mind. But at the same token, you have the bad actors also that will subject, and take advantage and put everybody on it, which I completely disagree with. Right. So I know that was a lot, but that's
no, that was good.
Scope.
And I liked how you explained, how she explained it to you, because that made, for me, I do believe, like you said earlier about the bridge, like that's where I think a lot of it happens, is that people get whatever, whether I see it all over the place, like, here, come get your Suboxone, come get your method, you know what I mean? And then,
Yep.
but there's no treatment. There's nothing helping those people, basically. And maybe
Sure.
someone will be on it for the rest of their life, but at least if they're getting some help to make themselves better, then that's where I'm with you on that. Like, that's
Yep.
what I think too. So yeah, so that was good too. There was one other thing I was going to talk about. Let's talk about where you're at now. You have 2 kids, you said?
Yeah. So, I mean, and this is the fun part for Hope. You know, when I got clean, I have no college education other than a semester and a half at a community college. I played music. Music was my passion. I was lucky enough to be with a group of guys where we went on tour for 3 years. We did a lot of amazing things. This is what I was using, of course. But I mean, I have no vocational skills. I don't know, you know, I never got proper trainings or anything in business. And I get clean. I meet this gentleman we referenced before, who mentored me. And I'll just share one story because I think it's interesting and it's pivotal. It was the first time that I realized that the program, in my case of Narcotics Anonymous, and the principles behind the steps at this point or at that point have little to nothing to do with using anymore, and everything to do with how I live in my actual life, not with substances. And when I was working in restaurants, the Applebee's that I had overdosed in hired me back when I got out of treatment, believe it or not. And I didn't want to work in restaurants anymore. And I met this gentleman and he taught me about health insurance. And we started a small insurance agency. I was working there and I was working for him. Long story short, this was before Obamacare. And the product that we were selling was a product for people who were sick that couldn't get major medical insurance because of pre-existing condition exclusions and things. And at the time that I started, you didn't need a license. And I was really good at the job and I got promoted and I managed a team of people. And then all of a sudden the law changed and you had to get an insurance license. And in Florida, where I was at the time, that particular license was for health insurance, life insurance, and variable annuities. And they don't like people with felony charges to sell variable annuities. So I got denied for my license. I had about 3.5, 4 years clean, somewhere around there. And I remember because I was doing well, you know, I was working, I felt good about myself, I was paying my own bills, and had been for a while now. But the change had taken place a little bit, but not completely, as far as my personality and the way that I reacted to things.
Okay.
And here's life showing up, right? In my mind, I'm doing the right thing. I've been staying clean. I haven't done anything wrong. And how could life do this to me? Right? This is something happening to me. And I'm upset. And my normal reaction is I blame. And then I run. And I don't deal with my problems in a healthy way whatsoever. And the old me would have easily just said, you know, F this, and I'm going to go work in restaurants and make up whatever, you know, validation or excuse and rationalization I had in my head as to why that was the right decision. Not that there's anything wrong with working in restaurants, but at that time, that's not what I wanted. And instead, I made some phone calls and I called my sponsor and I called my support groups and they told me to calm down and they told me to start looking at the steps differently. And what principles could I practice here in order to make a healthy decision and not a reactive decision? You know, the biggest thing that I ever picked up was my goal still is I want to get to a place in my life where I do not allow my feelings to dictate my actions.
Oh, that's good.
Right? Where my emotional response on something doesn't become a permanent decision because of something I'm feeling temporarily. And I didn't. So they said, well, maybe write a letter to the board and let them know who you are. They look at you on paper, you have this arrest record, you know, you don't look savory, maybe explain what you've been doing the last 3.5 years, et cetera. So I write this letter and it was a great letter. I mean, I was proud of my letter. It's like 3.5 pages, which at the time was a long letter for me. And I give them the whole story and I am, it's sealed. I'm excited. I'm like, there's no way they could deny me. This is the best letter that's ever been written. And I send it in and I get denied again within 3 days, you know, and I'm like devastated at this point. And I won't belabor the story, but I go through the same process. I make some more phone calls. And before I give up, which is my MO, is always just to give up and go for the easier, softer route. Another gentleman made a suggestion and he said, who are you? Why would they listen to you? You write a letter, you're just some, you know, guy with a record that means nothing to them. But what if other people wrote you letters that were substantial, that maybe had some stake in the community, that were taxpayers, business owners, et cetera? Maybe try that. And the cool thing that I learned is in, the 12-step fellowship that I belong to, but it's the same for any 12-step fellowship. When you come around enough and the consistency, and it's funny because working those principles, right? You show up early to the meeting, you stay later, you talk to people, you raise your hand. And I never knew why I did those things. They were just suggested to me and I did them. And this was a culmination of the last 3.5, 4 years of doing the right thing, where when I actually needed something, I got the gift. And the gift was I asked for help, and people believed me and they knew who I was because they watched me show up every single week consistently, and they watched me growing, and they were willing to vouch for me, on a piece of paper to a board, to a regulatory board, and say, this is a good person. This is what I've seen him do. And I got 38 character reference letters together.
Wow.
And it's crazy because in Narcotics Anonymous and any 12-step fellowship, we meet a variety of people, right? I know business owners, I know judges, I know police officers, I know respectable, I know congressmen. And these are the people that I asked, and they all said yes. And when I sent it, I got approved for my license. And it was the first time, and I feel very lucky because those stories don't always work out like that. I mean, they could have very easily said no still. But if you look at the trajectory of my life, especially with career and work, how different my life and the lives of many others would be if that process did not take place that way. Because that approval of that license solidified for me that the program, the 12-step fellowship, is way more than stop shooting dope.
Right.
It is an entire universe that helps me form principles to live by, and that they work, and that we can receive these gifts. And then from there, it was like a rocket ship. We started our first business a year later, and I'll skip to the end because we've sold those businesses since, and other businesses. And I just went through a sale and an exit with my last company in November. And we had 18 treatment centers in 7 different states. We employed, at that time, almost 935 people. I hire felons, where appropriate, of course, but meaning I don't restrict it based on their record.
Right.
And I can tell you a variety of other things that I'm involved in, a lot of real estate. I mean, I own properties, and it's not all about monetary things, but I can tell you that when I got clean, I had a backpack and an Applebee's uniform. That was it. That was my possessions. I had no money. I had nowhere to go. I had no job experience. I had a record, and I had a poor attitude. And I'm married. I've been married to my wife for 10 years. We just celebrated last November, 10 years.
Happy anniversary.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. I don't go outside of our marriage. We are committed, and I love it. It's funny because I talk to friends of mine who complain about being married. I love being married. My wife's my best friend. We have a good, healthy, and again, trust me, there's, we fight, but the communication that we learn in recovery is what helps us communicate and have healthy boundaries. I have 2 beautiful girls. They're 6.5 and 3.5. And, another gift that I didn't even understand what that would look like, but they don't have to see me use ever. My kids were born when I was clean, and they get to see the version of their father that I would want them to see, and through consistency and action, it's cool. It is. It's really cool, and it's great. I would complain. There's things that happen certainly, but life is good, and life is more than I ever deserved. That's for sure.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I appreciate you sharing all of this. It's been just really good. And I love to hear, and that's why I do this, because like you said, here you were clean, sober with a backpack and an Applebee's uniform. And people think that, that they can't come out of things and be better, and you can. Right. And that's why I do H.O.P.E, because I know so many people out there that have went through horrible struggles, whether it be addiction, death, divorce, cancer, but they choose, and that's where it's at. They choose to live a better, happier life. It's not like I said a little bit ago, we don't wake up and be like, woohoo, everything's glorious. We wake up and we choose to make our day better. I have this conversation with my sister, who's still a practicing alcoholic, and she's always like, she thinks I judge her, and I don't. She's my sister, and I don't judge anybody. But I said to her, she's like, well, you think you're so much better. And I said, no, I don't. I know that we both get up in the morning. We both put our pants on in the morning. We make different choices in our day. That's the only difference. you know, and that's the way that it is with anything. I feel like, you know, you chose to be a better version of Mike. Now look at how great it is. Like you said, your daughters get to see Mike, their dad. Never do they have to see him the way that he was, you know, and your
Yeah.
wife. And I just love your whole story. I can't wait to see what you have going on in the next year. I always like to re-bring people on, like after 6 months to a year,
Yeah.
just to like, hey, what's going on now in your life? And since you've sold your businesses, are you kind of chilling for a little while? Or yeah, I mean, I know you got other things, like you said, real estate and stuff, but
Yeah, I don't know how to sit still. I don't do board very well. So I don't think
yeah,
I'll ever, even if things, you know, were unconceivably well, I would never stop. I
yeah,
like to create, you know, it's fun because with business, it becomes more of a creation. And, you know, one of the best, the best gifts that I've ever received in business is being able to grant opportunities to other people the way that I was granted an opportunity. You know, I wouldn't be where I am without the gentleman, you know, that mentored me. And now we get to give other people opportunities and watch them make choices on a daily basis and succeed. And it's awesome because then all these other little sub things blossom. You know, I can open no different than the third step. You know, the God of my understanding can open an opportunity, can show me and open a door. I still have to get up off the couch and move my feet and walk through that door and be able to acknowledge it. So I don't take any credit ever for someone comes to one of our facilities and stays clean and sober. They did the work. We just gave them an opportunity and a door.
yeah.
And that's no different with the people that, you know, we engage with in business and we hire. And, you know, a lot of them have done so well, and it's so rewarding to watch that. So to answer your question, I've been very busy with a lot of real estate stuff mostly, and a few different ancillary businesses that we get involved with. And, you know, we'll see where it goes.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, is there any like last little bit of hope or word you'd like to say to anybody before we?
Yeah. I mean, well, first off, thank you again for having me. This was great. And I really appreciate it. Happy to come back in once or a year if you so choose. I think podcasts like this are really cool because they can also hit a different demographic. You know, it's not just, I mean, you know, I've done podcasts before where it's a treatment center owner and they're doing it probably to promote, you know, this or that. And some of those are great also, don't get me wrong, but this is all a great platform that you're using.
Thank you.
So I would leave people with this, is that regardless of however it feels right now, it is very temporary. It doesn't have to feel that way for long. And to your point, if we wake up and we make better choices and we change our perspective just a little bit, then things will get better. Yeah. And I remind myself that often, because trust me, I can be in a not good place like that and have to remember that as well. So it's not that I'm any better. I just have more practice.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Well, I appreciate you getting on here with me today. Everybody, I hope you have a fabulous day, and I can't wait to share more hope with you all. Have a great day. Thanks. Bye, Mike.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye.